Hey guys, today we're in the book of 1 Kings chapter 2. So now we have David basically on his deathbed, and we see the beginning of Solomon taking over as king. Notice it says in the first verse, when it's David's time to die drew near, he commanded Solomon his son. Now, we don't have all that he commanded here, but if you were to read 1 Chronicles chapter 28 and 29, it goes into great detail what David tells Solomon right here. Much of it is to build a temple and what that temple should be. But if you go and read that, you'll get some fill-in that we'll get in a month or so. And so he says, I'm going about the way of the earth. He says, I'm going to die. I'm going to be dust again, right? And so even David, though he had a good life, though God has blessed them, though his kingdom will forever reign, he knows that he is flesh. He's going to die. He's going to the grave. And he tells Solomon to be strong, to keep the charge of the Lord, walking in his ways, keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, his testimony, and the law of Moses. Well, what a great word from one father to his son. Obey God. That's what he says. To fear the Lord, to be strong, and to obey his words. So important. And if he does this, that you will prosper. That's what he says, right? He continues on in the next couple verses, and he says, if you pay close attention to your way, if you walk before me and you give me faithfulness, you shall not lack. God has promised to all of the children of David and Solomon, all the heirs to the throne of David, if you trust me and you walk with me, I will bless your socks off. You will be a great king, and I will give you everything that you can do. But we will see, starting with Solomon, on how they will not walk with God, how they will not trust him at times, and that will begin the descent of all of the kings. It's just amazing, right? That God promises, if you love me and you walk with me, I will bless you. But they can't even do that. The same that we cannot do that. We cannot love God and follow his ways 24/7. And so we see that. David, in some of his last words, tells Solomon, basically, you need to start your kingdom with justice. You need to start it right. And so he gives him 3 people that he needs to kill, right? Joab, right, which was his general, but he went with Adonijah, Abner, and Amasa. And so these are people that were against him. And that's really what a lot of the chapter is about. And so he basically tells them to do not let his gray head go down to Sheol, which is the grave in peace. Basically, you need to make what is right and wrong. And so you need to go after these guys. And we see in verse 10, David slept with his father. Literally one verse, David dies. Now we have more of that in Chronicles, but in this chapter, we see this. He reigned for 40 years total, 7 as when it was one kingdom, and 33 in Jerusalem. And then Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. And now we see Solomon starting to establish his throne, right? David has now died, and now what does Solomon do? He follows the words of his father. He starts with justice. And so David dies, and all of a sudden Adonijah comes to Bathsheba, and she says, hey, is this good or bad, right? Because he just plotted to go after David. And so his mother is saying, hey, are you going to go after Solomon? And he says, no, I'm not going to go after Solomon, but I have one request. And he's not going to listen to me, but he'll listen to his mother. So here's what I want. What does he want? He wants Abishag, the Shunammite, right? This is the concubine that was with David, right? That we talked about yesterday. He says, hey, I want a concubine. Even though David is dead, this concubine is David's property. It is David's woman per se, right? One of many, but it's his woman. And so he says, hey, I want David's wife, right? Even though that it's not a wife, it's kind of what it's saying, right? I want this young woman who laid with David. And so Bathsheba comes and asks Solomon, hey, this is what he wants. And Solomon, he perceives exactly what's going on. And he says to his mother, ask for him a kingdom also. Solomon could see what Adonijah was doing. He was trying to get with David's woman so that he could rebuild kind of back up and set up a place and a story that he could take over the throne, right? David, though Solomon is on the throne, Adonijah could say, but I have his woman and I have this and I have that and I'm an heir to the throne. And he could build up a place, or at least a good argument to give Solomon a run for his money. Well, Solomon seen through that, and he said that he shall be put to death today, and that's exactly what Solomon does. He has him killed. And so Adonijah is killed. And then in verse 28, we see Joab does the same thing, right? Remember, Joab, the general of David, at the very end of David's life, goes and supports Adonijah. And so here he is going to be killed. And Joab does exactly what Adonijah does. He runs into the temple. He grabs the horns, the edges of the altar, and the soldiers going to kill him says, hey, come out of the temple. And he said, I will not. And he goes back and tells King Solomon, and Solomon says, drag him out of there and kill him. And that's exactly what they do. And so then in verse 36, we see that the king sent and summoned Shimei. Now, I know that's hard to remember, but this was a guy in 1 Samuel, and this was an associate. He really worked with King Saul, right? And so he goes to Shimei, and he said, here's what I'm going to do. You deserve death, but I'm not going to kill you. You can build a house, and you can build it here in Jerusalem, but you can never leave that house. Today, we call it house arrest, right? So he shows him a little mercy. I should kill you, but I'm not. I will allow you to live as long as you never leave the house. And Shimei says, what you say is good. He understood that Solomon was giving him mercy and grace, and he said, that's a great idea. A couple years goes by, some slaves, some servants leave, and now he runs away to go and try to get those servants. Now, we don't know if it was an intentional that he was doing this, or if he'd forgot after a couple years or thought it wasn't a big deal. He wasn't running away forever. He was going to get his servants, but he was going against the word of King Solomon. Once King Solomon heard this, he said that you shall die. And that's why the last verse of chapter 2, I know it was a long chapter, it says this, so the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. We see from the very beginning, David dies, Solomon is the new king, and Solomon does exactly what David tells him to do, to start with justice. He gets rid of all the enemies, okay? For good or for bad, whatever you think it is, he gets rid of all the people who went against David, his father, right? He went against his father's enemies, which would become his enemies, because they're all going to be going against the throne. And he gets rid of them from the very beginning of the kingship of Solomon. And so now Solomon can start his kingship or his kingdom in a good and trustworthy manner without so many people trying to go against the throne. One thing I want to say, I just want to point out, and in verse 33, Solomon is speaking, and he says, but for David and his descendants, and for his house and for his throne, there shall be peace from the Lord forevermore. This is a prophetic statement, but it's not speaking about David. It's not speaking about Solomon. It's not speaking about the sons of Solomon. It's speaking about the Messiah. There will be peace for the kingdom of David, but not for David's descendants, but for the new new David, for Jesus, for the Messiah that has come. And that is the kingdom that will reign in peace. So until until Jesus comes back and sets up his eternal kingdom, right? There will not be peace. It is only through Jesus in the final end of the days, after he comes back, then we will experience the true peace that Solomon was talking about, that God promised David several years ago. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 3. God bless.